Hey guys, welcome back to Affirm a Day Workout with Helen Chen. Today we're going to be doing this screenshot from the movie Titanic. I don't know what you guys might think about this movie. I only remember watching it when I was very young and actually looking through again at the screen caps for this movie and kind of like thinking about it. I mean, it still holds up. This is why it was one of the highest grossing movies of all time. It's very well done. It's beautiful, and there's a lot here that I really love. There's just some scenes even that don't really, besides the famous ones of, them standing at the bow of the ship or any number of other famous shots in this movie. Everything is really well done. I was really shocked, and actually, I had thought about doing that shot where they're, doing the like flying thing at the front of the boat, but I thought it would be too simple and maybe a little bit too cheesy to kind of do, so I chose this one instead. And the thing that I really love about this one is just the very purposeful, like directional light that they're using for the room itself, and just how the characters are almost mostly light over dark, which is not something that we have dealt with too much in this in the workout series so far, so I thought it would be a good opportunity to kind of do that. One of the things that I remember the most about this movie was you know what, it's so funny. It's actually one of the first movies I ever saw in theaters, if you can believe it. My family were not big movie goers. We didn't do it very often, but for some reason, this movie just really spoke to my dad. He took us like 3 times. So yeah, I actually remember watching this movie in theaters, and only ever thought of it as kind of like a cheesy movie since then. But I've amended that. I don't think it is. I think it's a beautiful movie. It's a beautiful story. It's really well done. And there are just some scenes and shots in here that are just spectacular, especially when it comes to some of the group like dining scenes, and just the complexity of the sets, and just thinking back to how they even constructed the finale, the climax where the Titanic actually sinks, and how that set is broken up and the camera angles that they use, and I don't know how they did it. It's still pretty mind-boggling what they were able to accomplish, and just the work that went into it, like the scale models that they must have used, just how many different areas of the Titanic that they decided to showcase. I love that they went through and did, the super bougie stuff like what we're seeing here, and then also give a look into what it was like for people who worked on the ship and lower class tickets, in economy kind of people. So it's just such a like well-rounded and detailed world that this movie kind of takes you into, and then allows this story to kind of take place. So that's just me kind of like basically apologizing to this movie for ever having doubted its amazingness, and appreciating everything about it, even though I haven't seen it in like 20 years. But let's talk about this frame. So this study today is gonna take me an hour exactly, almost, when I look back at the recording. And the reason is because it is one of the more complicated interior scenes that we've had to do thus far. But I do like a lot of stuff about it, and so that's why I wanted to choose this, even though it is a little bit challenging. So one of the most challenging things about this, obviously, is the detail in the room, especially with the dark wooden molding and framing details everywhere. And I think they just did a really, really good job dressing the set to match the kind of, like, everything kind of makes sense. There's like a design thing here that is throughout, the major design elements of the lighter wall with the darker wood accent kind of is flown throughout. Even in the planter on the left, it kind of, bottom left, it matches the rest of the room, and so it kind of creates this feeling of like, the whole room is of this pattern, and it's broken up with a little bit of green from the plants. And then them who are kind of like posed on top of it, the two characters and everything that they're around is of a lighter value. So you have the lighter rattan kind of table and chairs, and then the white table linens. They're both wearing pretty light colors, and so they read very much light over dark for most of this frame. The one iffy area is, of course, her silhouette with her face, because it gets very close to the value of the wall that's in shadow that's behind. But the thing that saves it is the plant, which is green. So now you have enough, color contrast there for her face to read and not disappear into those shadow shapes. So that was really smart for them to do. And it just really kind of adds that one complementary color to what is primarily a very kind of like warm beigey toned overall frame, because the wall is warm, the wood is warm, they all kind of exist almost in the same sphere, and then the green just helps to kind of break it up as an accent. And it's just really smart to do that. And also throughout the whole movie, they really take advantage of Kate Winslet's hair and the beautiful color statement that it makes, and helps her stand out, and it's no different here. But I just really love how bright the characters are, even though Kate Winslet is primarily in shadow. It just shows that they've kind of exposed up to be able to catch those details. Another reason that I decided to choose this frame is because of just like thinking back and relating this scene back to the story. I really appreciate how they frame the characters and their relationship to each other to kind of give you a lot of insight into how they are with each other. So for a lot of the scenes where, like the famous scene, right, of Jack drawing her like his French girls, is very intimate and warm, and the camera gets very close, and all of this stuff. But this scene sets up a lot. It tells us all we need to know about their relationship. Like, we already sensed previously that there's tension there, that she's not really into this guy, and that and this is actually the first indication that we get from him through the action of the scene that he can even be quite cruel. And that's something that, we just thought he was kind of a dick before, but we didn't know that he could get into, that territory, later in the scene where he flips the table and actually, I think he chokes her. So that was really unsettling. So I love the framing of the shot being slightly further back from the characters and having them be facing off in this way. Like, without knowing any context of this, it doesn't look like it's a comfortable intimate dinner. It's they're at arm's length. She's leaning back even. And then you have that ray of light kind of going between them, and his face is in shadow, but his shirt is lit. There's just a feeling to this frame that kind of just clues you into how the characters are feeling about each other, and how actually confrontational their relationship is. And I think that was really smart to do, and such a great choice for this scene to kind of because we see prior to this that she may not be happy with her life, but we're not really sure why. And then we see this, and then we get it. We're like, oh, this is why. I also just love that they're using the symmetry of the room and the table, but it's not totally all like super matched up. Like, it's not exactly matched up. It's still a little bit unbalanced. And the thing that kind of balances out that unbalance is that ray of light. And I think it's just really smart. Like, we see a lot of it's no like mistake, or it's no coincidence that there's a lot of this shot in Queen's Gambit, one of the other series we talked about in this workout, in these workouts, because it is, like the way that they shoot those chess scenes is it's kind of like a battle, they're facing off, and this one has that feeling as well, even though supposedly they're having tea. Another thing that I took for granted before when I saw this, when I don't know how old I was. I don't really want to find out either. But looking back on it in its entirety is just also how much natural light they end up using. It's they you can tell that they shot outside. I think I read somewhere when I was doing a little bit of research before I did this scene that they actually built a scale model of the Titanic that was just a mere few feet short of the original, so it was gigantic. So I can't even imagine the feat that that took. And they filmed a lot of the outdoor shots on that, and the famous scene where they're like flying or whatever. So it had a lot of beautiful kind of exterior shots that I totally forgot. I only remembered what happened in the ship really. So um, that's worth it to look at as well if you're looking for more kind of studies to do. It was really hard to narrow it down to this one. I had a few different other candidates. Maybe I'll bring one back for a later session of this workshop. Just because there's just like a large kind of breadth of material there. They have really beautiful interior shots. They have really beautiful exterior shots. They have a lot of really dramatic lighting. As we all know, when the Titanic sinks, that it's all shot kind of at nighttime even. And there's some really interesting things that they do there to kind of make sure everybody still reads. I really loved one of the moments that really stuck out in my mind is going through that part and seeing the rescue teams show up and they're shining these kind of flashlight like lights on the survivors. And then one of the scenes that really I still remember right now pretty clearly is I forgot her name, but the Kate Winslet character is on her wooden raft thing, and she starts blowing the whistle, and we're just like, oh, are they gonna find her? And that's that tense moment where we think when we're trying, like, rooting for them to find her so that she gets saved. We know she does, of course. She's the one giving this whole narration, but it's just that dramatic moment. And then the indication that they have like heard and will save her is just the barest kind of touch of that light raking her face. So that still stands out as just a really beautiful like visual way to communicate that action, that story point. I really also liked seeing how specific they were with the colors they were choosing for even like the water when the Titanic starts sinking and the water seeps in. The water is tinted this like green color that doesn't show up anywhere else in the film really. The shots start getting kind of tilted. There's very few like stable kind of shots. There's not a lot of parallels. Like this shot we're getting, we see even in the decor and the interior design of the set, there's all of these horizontals and vertical lines. And I think that they use some of these design elements later for the other parts of the sets to kind of emphasize how off kilter things are when the Titanic starts sinking. So all of the shots are like, I'm not one to really enjoy painting Dutch angles. It's just not for me. And it's because I feel like it needs to be justified with a story reason instead of just, I kind of feel like if I overuse Dutch angles in my own work, it's because the scene isn't really communicating what I need it to, and I'm just trying to like spice it up almost. But in this movie, they use it for that purpose. It's to, hit the story point of like, of course, the ship sinking versus then just adding some sort of like dynamicness to the frame. So we're like already almost 15 minutes in, and I'm still dealing with this background. But be patient; it'll really I think it'll really pay off. I always try and tackle the thing that I think is going to be the hardest first for a lot of these, just so I know that it'll be like my suffering is up front, and so I know that it's easier sailing after this. And actually, it's kind of fun to be. One of my favorite things to do in these actually is to because my process of doing light and shadow is so different when I'm doing my own work. Like there's a lot of multiply layers involved. There's a lot of adjustment layers and things like that. I rarely paint light and shadow directly like I do in these studies. I just find that it's kind of fun to do that. And so that's why I'm like, I love the act of like choosing the light color and the dark color for like the wall, and then choosing a corresponding lighter color that reflects the color of the light for, you know, the lighter parts of the wood frame. Like I really love that kind of a thing. So that's why I'm maybe focusing a little bit more on the background here than is really necessary. But it's also kind of up to you if you want to do that or not. There's a way to do this study and simplify some of those details down without getting too caught up in it. For example, if you didn't want to do the little diamond patterns in the door, you don't have to. Most of it is like, as long as you get the door frame there, it's probably good enough. So, but I'm just going through and putting those details in because it's what kind of drew me to this shot in the first place. I'm also going to be using kind of the same thought process that I'm employing here by starting with the background first, and then layering, and then kind of like painting, eating into the figures, almost like pretending that it goes further than it does, so that when I do the figures on top of it, I can kind of carve in and out and not be afraid of having to patch up holes I missed in the background. I'm going to do the same thing for the characters in the chair, actually, because the chair is this annoying kind of rattan thing with these little, you know, caged patterns and stuff. I'm just gonna paint the characters and pretend that and like there's nothing obstructing them, and then paint the details of the chair and the table and stuff on top. Now that I'm kind of thinking about this movie and when I was watching it in the theaters, it's just, I mean, clearly I wasn't old enough to be in this movie to like watch this movie, but I also very clearly remember like that scene where they like are in the carriage like stored. It's like the sex scene and the hand goes up, and I remember even back then when this movie just came out, people were laughing in the theater like it was something funny. I might actually, after this study, go back and watch the whole thing all together. But it's just, you know, it's a classic. You gotta appreciate it. So now we're gonna actually move into the figures finally. I'm starting with Kate Winslet here because I just really love her skin tone. It's hard though because it's one of those that has like, I don't know, it's like a cooler, like magenta-y color, and then also there's like this orange reflected light bouncing up kind of a thing. And then not to be confused with like the warmth of her hair. They're all different types of warm colors that are cool, you know. So I wanted to nail that first and really get that kind of going. One of the things I do kind of wish I did first was to put in an indication of the plants behind her so that I could, you know, more accurately judge the skin color. But for now, I think, you know, it turned out fine, and it didn't hinder me too much. And when it comes to drawing or painting in this green stuff, I just wouldn't worry too much about like getting the specific leaves in the right placement. It's more the purpose it serves there is literally just as a color contrast between that and her face. So as long as there's a little bit of that that helps, you know, the silhouette side of her face profile stand out, that's all you really need to worry about. Another aspect about the film that might be fun to just like take a look at is how they very clearly delineate, you know, what was. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of visual cues here. It's not confusing at all when they switch between the current timeline and, you know, because the whole movie is basically a flashback. And then when they go to, you know, back in time to retell this story. One of the things that, besides just the pure differences in the set and the people and the costuming and whatever, giving you kind of a hint of that change from shot to shot, they also do this thing where they kind of just like completely switch color palettes and lighting scenarios, which is really, really smart. I mean, they can light, you know, the interior of that research vessel thing that they're on, whatever color they want, but they chose kind of a modern blue light kind of a feel to it. And so when you're like switching between a scene like this that is very warm and natural and almost like nostalgic in some ways in the color palette to that, it's pretty jarring. And so right away, without even like if I were to show you this scene and then that one next, you would immediately assume we're in a different place. Like it's just such a fast read. So I really like how they did that and how they kept those two things separate, like almost like a, because we check in periodically from the past and the present, and they keep them very kind of delineated and separate, and but consistent in their own worlds, you know. So you're never really confused, like at what point of the story you're at. It's something that we also kind of tried to employ, like that general theory when we were working on Ralph Breaks the Internet, because it's a traveling movie and there's like all these different places to go. Each of the different worlds was heavily color coded so that you would never be confused. Like you would see the screen turn orangish and be like, oh, that's Slaughter Ace because it's orangey compared to the bluiness of whatever. So it's just another kind of technique that we used so that like there would never be a question or nobody would ever be confused about where the characters were at any point in time because there were so many different locations. I think these fingers holding this plate is as detailed I want this whole thing to get. So I'm just gonna, after this, if when I fill in the stuff for like the tablecloth and all that stuff, I'm just not even gonna worry too much about it. It all reads as extra kind of detail anyway, and it's just kind of like it kind of falls into the category of like being just textures versus the larger, more silhouetted masses of the characters where we're really supposed to look. So now that her figure is kind of laid in and I'm pretty happy with it, I'm gonna start laying in the rest of the image, moving kind of from left to right. Like I mentioned before, I'm not really gonna, spend too much time on the stuff that's on this table, just a little bit. So I'm gonna first lay down the tablecloth, pretend nothing's on it for now, kind of just have it as a base. I'm gonna try and maybe move on to the figure on the right. I've been kind of putting him off because I just, you know what, I just don't like his character, so I don't want to paint him. So I've just been like waiting this whole time, but we gotta put him in. And then after that, I'm gonna do all of the smaller kind of like stuff on the table. The stuff that's on the little credenza thing in the back, all kind of in one pass. And then add detail all over so that I don't get too caught up in like one part of it and then accidentally add too much like detail. So I actually started kind of recently talking about this course more openly while I was working on it, and I found a couple questions here and there about what I find most useful from doing stuff like this. And I think the simplest answer for me, besides the most obvious one, which is to study specific things like color and lighting and staging and composition and all these other things, it's just the more of these you do, the more you just inherently start learning the language of film and developing a bit more of a cinematic eye. So when you start planning out your own images, if the idea is to do visual development for film and you want to do a moment painting or something like that, hopefully through doing a lot of this and just internalizing a lot of the information when you're watching films, it will just naturally lend you to start making choices to make that composition seem a little bit more cinematic. I do know one of the most kind of vague critiques somebody could possibly give on somebody's or if I could possibly give on somebody's portfolio, and I've done it a few times, is to comment that their images feel more like illustrations than they do feel like films frames. And VizDev is kind of just the goal is the final product is about making it feel like a film, because that's the final product. And I think that this exercise just really helps you internalize some of what makes things feel cinematic, whether you're able to like clearly articulate it in words or not. Like it'll just kind of flow through you. You'll start understanding it a little bit better. And then another reason I think that that's important is that it starts helping you approach other aspects of your job in a more relevant way. So for example, my main thing when I work in films or animations is set design. I barely do any character design at all. But for sets, what I love about this exercise and in thinking about how others approach set design and how I like to approach it myself, knowing this stuff is really helpful, because then I can pitch my set to the directors in a way where I take into account the types of shots that that I feel like will represent it the best, and the story the best. And one of the best examples I have of this that I bring up all the time, if you've heard me talk at a workshop or anywhere, I've probably talked about this, just like the incredible stuff. But for example, there's this the scene in Ratatouille when we're introduced to the quote-unquote antagonist, Ego. When we first see his room, it's a top-down shot, and his room is like blood red. It's really intimidating, and it's also in the shape of a coffin. Like when you're looking at it, and no real room in the world is ever going to be shaped like a coffin. Well, there might be. I'm not going to say there's none. But it's there because it's serving a story point. The set is telling a story about the character, about how he's this restaurant critic that like effectively uses his reviews to kill restaurants. So that's why he's got all this weird like death motifs everywhere. And plus it just is kind of like so exaggerated that it's funny. But the reason I bring this up is that you would, from any other angle in that room, you would not see that it was, or you would not totally feel that it was coffin shaped unless you were shooting it top down like that shot was in Ratatouille. And so they had that shot because the set was that shape, and vice versa. Like they're two aspects of the same goal. And so when I'm thinking about designing a set, I'm always thinking about it in this context. And if I were to shoot this scene, what I want the set to feel and look like, and then I kind of reverse engineer it. So that's why I feel like studying like these film frames that have really great design and production design and cinematography is so important, because it gives you opportunities to stretch it as far as you can go and literally have like a coffin shaped room. Like other examples is there's another shot where we're looking towards Ego, and he's centered and he's typing on his typewriter. But what's so great is that like it's a symmetrical shot, one, because it's powerful, and two, and he's in his element and he's in power and whatever. It totally makes sense that they're shooting him straight on. But another fun element is that the backside of his typewriter has a skull design on it that's hidden into the design of the typewriter, and it's symmetrical, and so it adds further to the symmetry of the scene and further to that motif of like death that was introduced through the coffin-shaped room. So there's all these layers and all these examples through a lot of films, where you can just tell the filmmakers are just had total fun coming up with these ideas. And I think that that's what's most helpful about doing these studies is, one, not only are we flexing and really learning about color and light and just getting that practice in, we're really able to sit and internalize a lot of this great information as well. Too stringent with making sure that my layers are all figured out, like person one, person two, layer one, layer, whatever, like that. But um, I am thankful that I was able to do at least most of the background on a layer so that I can go in and just do this guy's face without having to carve too much in and out and patchy work. But otherwise, it doesn't matter. Like these studies, you can do it however you want. I could have done it the other way too. I just didn't want to sit there and really noodle the exact shapes of his profile to get his likeness or anything like that. I actually really wish that I took a bit of a simpler approach with his face, because I actually really like how I managed to keep her pretty simple, just really focusing on, if I really had to simplify down the major plane changes of her face. But for him, because I guess he's more structured or there's more small shapes going on there, I'm having a hard time doing that. And I'm trying to get like, his forehead, his cheekbone, and the socket of his eye, things like that. And it might have gotten a little bit too detailed. If I had to do this over again, I think I would have tried harder to keep him a little bit simpler. And now the part I'm sure we were all dreading when I pulled this study up, which is the chairs, the rattan stuff. So obviously, I'm not even going to try and get it to be accurate. I'm just going to be like, well, I think that there's, I don't know if there's 12 lines there or 9, but just kind of getting the idea of it, because you know what, it doesn't matter. It's not an important piece of this of this image. And in fact, if you wanted to do this study and not even paint the chairs, I wouldn't blame you. Now we're doing the very last kind of detail pass over the whole thing. After I fill in her chair and the rest of her dress, I'm going to actually take kind of a detail approach across the whole image and try and add the same amount of detail. Again, just so that there's not one area that's more detailed than the other, but kind of just take it all in one pass and see how that feels. Especially with the stuff that's in the middle, like whatever's on the table, because it is also overlapping with whatever is on that, I don't know if it's called a credenza, whatever that is in the back as well, that has these like metal objects on it. So I just want to make sure that I do all of that at once, because I find that, because I mean, as you can see, my brush setup is kind of strange. I don't use hotkeys for the size of my brush. I use either the brush presets on the right or even the brush tool thing on the pull down on the left. And so one of the things I found is that if I do, my second detail pass all at the same time, and all I'm changing is the color, then I'm using the same size brush. And so it almost makes all of the detail that I put in about the same amount of detail, because the brush doesn't change size, so I'm very limited. Which is good, because I don't want to be, working on one area and using 3 strokes to describe an object and then move on to the next, and all of a sudden it's the same size object, but I'm using 15 tinier strokes. Like, just it won't really match. And so that's why I kind of do this in passes. It's like, if you think about it in terms of like oil painting, it's like you use your biggest brush first, and then you switch to your smaller ones, and you don't, it's a hassle to kind of switch back and forth between small and big. So it's nice. It actually keeps me on track, and it keeps me from getting too detailed in any one area. We finally retired the line drawing, so now it's just doing the last little bit of stuff, and it's all just readability things, making her read a little bit more, closing off some of that space in the light there with the leaf shadows, just to make it feel less dark. And then I will be doing a bit of a bloom pass, much like how we've approached it before. Just because it's not the most atmospheric piece. There's not a ton of like particles in the air or anything like that, but there is a certain kind of like I don't want to say Vaseline, but they use like Vaseline like bloom that happens, especially around her, and I think it just helps kind of highlight how innocent or like angelic she is in this instance, and then how bad you're gonna feel for her when he flips out and like threatens her. So I'm gonna at least add that and make her feel a little bit more angelic. I'm gonna blow out his shirt a little bit as well, but he can. I don't care about his figure in this. It's hard for me to care because I hate his character so much. The last bit of bloom I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do the whole like duplicate the image, blur it, set the whole layer to lighten, and then mask out the so I can kind of selectively paint in the bloom. I'm actually exaggerating it a little bit here just because I can, but there's just something happening when I squint my eyes, especially at the table, where things are like bloomy and blown out enough that I want it, I want to kind of replicate that same effect. And then after that, we are all done. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I hope this was a fun study to do. I know it was a long hour, but hopefully you did this faster than I did. All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks.